Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. And today I will be reviewing Boosh, An Ember in the Ashes by Sabaa Tahir, book one of, I guess, a quartet of the same name. So, you may have clicked on this because it says Rant-ish review. First off, I'm going to say that this book was not written for me. This is young adult, which is not, a sin in and of itself. It's just the characters are young and they feel young. And not only do they feel young, but the adults feel young, which is an issue with me. An Ember in the Ashes reminds me really, like a lot, of a combination of Fireborn by Rosaria Munda and Ashes of the Sun by Django Wexler, which is the first book of Burning Blade and Silver Eye, his new trilogy that came out this past year that I reviewed and didn't love. It was fine, but it like part of what I say in that review is that it felt really young. This felt the same, especially when there's like also the fact that there's resistance and there's two. So anyway, start at the beginning. What this book is about is these people called the Scholars who are, they value like knowledge and art and whatever. They were conquered by this empire that came out of the north called the Marshals, who are very, I want to say they're very clearly based on the Romans, but they're not. I was told they're based on the Romans, and so I knew that, but it's not super clear they're based on the Romans other than the fact that they call these people, their last name are their Gaines, which means, tribe, clan, family. So like the Gaines Viturius is like the Viturius family. And their names are quasi Roman sounding, but not all. Like there's Marcus, but then there's also Zacharias, so it's you've got the kind of combination. Some of it sounds Roman, some of it doesn't. And the Romans were cultural, they were cultural parasites. They were just like, hey, just pay your taxes and, we don't actually care. Also, we may call you to fight sometime, but otherwise we don't care what you do. Just stop, don't rabble rouse. The Marshall Empire is very, very much in everyone's business, like controlling everything. So it's like a super evil Roman Empire. So anyway, the action mostly takes place, and this is one of the parts that I like, is because I like the academy setting. Like the school setting doesn't bother me the way it bothers some people, and I know the school setting is pretty common for a YA book, but this is a military academy called Black Cliff that is up on a cliffside, and it's supposed to be impenetrable. And one of our main characters is Elias, who is the son of the head of Black Cliff, who's called the Commandant. I'll talk about the Commandant in a minute. She is super mean. That is my in short. I'll talk about her in long momentarily. He's like the best trainee they have, and he's about to graduate along with his best friend, who is the second best fighter, Helene, and they've been friends for forever, since they've been there, like 14 years. And then we have Laia, who is a scholar turned slave. And then, before I tell you kind of what Laia's going on, guys, this is minor spoilers for like the plot of this, and there might be minor spoilers. I'm not going to spoil anything huge about who lives or who dies or anything like that. But I'm assuming that if you're watching this, you either, you're not going to read it because it's Ember in the Ashes and you don't really like YA, or you've already read this and you're coming to see in what ways you can curse my name because I don't really love your book, or you agree with me, you've read this and you also agree, and you're coming to see which ways that I am right. But either way, it's not gonna be huge spoilers. Like if you don't want to know anything, you should definitely click away. Otherwise, like I'm just gonna talk about general kind of plot beats because it's necessary to talk about the things that I did not enjoy about this book. So Laia is a scholar turned slave because at the very beginning, the Marshals raid her grandparents' home because her brother has been like snooping around, and they kidnap her brother, and she conveniently runs into the resistance. This is all in like chapter 1. She conveniently runs into the resistance that is like fighting against the Empire, and they promise to free her brother from prison if she goes undercover as a slave in Black Cliff to the Commandant and spies for the resistance. And that is the general premise of this book. Now, my problem with Ember in the Ashes is not that it's YA. Like yes, I don't tend to enjoy YA because the characters are young. This is really, without exaggeration, the tropiest book I've ever read. It has more tropes than any other book. And yeah, all YA is trope heavy, and fantasy is trope heavy. But this has more tropes, and more tropes that I don't enjoy than really any other book that I've read. So let me see if I can figure it out. Chosen ones. We've got not one, but two, ladies and gentlemen, love triangles. We've got murderous bully. Oh my gosh, are you freaking kidding me with the murderous bully yet again? We have the villain who kicks puppies because they're just that evil. We've got the it's not what you think, but I don't have time to explain, I'll explain later. We've got the end up telling me what the protagonist looks like because she sees herself in a mirror. We've got the young character can only vividly remember like one memory from their dead parent where they're telling them to entrust something, and they always call them some kind of diminutive. Like, oh, like in this one, it's like, oh, keep this safe, little cricket. But it's always like, oh, little sparrow, oh, little grasshopper, oh, little rock, or whatever it is. Like, you know, there's always that thing. Like, keep this safe, little bug, or little great white shark. So we've got that. We've got villain monologuing the whole plan. We've got villain telling the sidekick to take the captured character out back and kill them, even though it's so obvious the character is not gonna take them out back and kill them. We've got one of my least favorite. We've got the stumbling across a hidden conversation at the exact moment that reveals important information trope. It's just everywhere. And even that, okay, so good things about this. The world is interesting. The lore is interesting, even though most of the lore is given to you in a single chapter in this huge info dump that it just kind of comes out of nowhere. It reminded me a lot of the history class chapter in Sword of Kaigen, where they get out all the history by the kids sitting there listening to the teacher. So it feels kind of like that, which it didn't bother me too much. I don't actually hate info dumps the way most people do, but it wasn't very subtle at all. And I also like how that lore, kind of like the magic and these like magical creatures or stuff kind of blends with more kind of Middle Eastern folklore like Ifrits and Jinn and things like that. So I did like, and that stuff was kind of, it wasn't super harped upon, so it kind of stayed mostly in the background, and that was all really interesting. And in addition, where two of the characters end up at the end of this book, where one thread where two of the characters from this book has my interest in how that is going to be played out, mostly because of, and I'm not going to spoil how it ends, if you've read it, you know. How this ends, definitely, one of the threads that ends feels very, very Roman in its ending. And I'm very interested to see how that kind of plays out. And that has to do with the Emperor, the Emperor of the Martial Empire. That the whole thread with the Emperor is what has me the most interested. I also really like the complex relationship between Elias and his friend Helene. They have known each other forever, and as any of you, and don't lie and pretend, like don't lie, like just because, oh, they might be watching, don't lie. Guys, we all know when we were young and we had friends and we just grew up with them, a lot of times it ended up, it results in kind of some confusing feelings at times to where like you've known this person forever and you're really close to them and they're your really good friend, but do you also feel like more than that for them? And it's all very complex, and that is my favorite thing in this, is that relationship that Helene and Elias have, as opposed to the trope that I did not mention, which is insta-love, which is every other romantic entanglement in this book. It's insta-love. Guys, it's not even insta-love. It's like out of nowhere, all of a sudden, they say, and it's just bad. Like, I'll read you, I wrote down one thing that I just did not like. Like, it's like there's just no nuance at all for it. So like, okay, so there's this character that's being mean, like it's been a huge douchebag, right? Like for several chapters. And then all of a sudden, the person he's being a douchebag to, like says, you're being a douchebag, stop it. And the guy's like, sorry. And so that's all that happens. Literally, that's it. That's it. That is, and I'm not kidding you. I'm not exaggerating. That is their only interaction. That's it. That is their only interactions. And it follows with this. His words are reluctant, but a reluctant apology is better than none at all. I nod jerkily and realize his eyes are not blue or green, but a deep chestnut brown. You're noticing his eyes, which means you're staring into them, which means you need to stop. And at that point, I'm like, oh, okay. So this is gonna be one of the romantic entanglements. And it's like there's nothing that's indicated that's been a thing before. And this brings me to the problems. The main problems that I have with this book is nothing, for me, nothing in this book possessed any nuance, other than the one thing that I've mentioned to you, and that is the relationship between Helene and Elias. Everything else in this book is about as ham-fisted as it can get. I did not predict everything that was going to happen, but nothing that happened was surprising or unexpected. I wanted, at some point in this book, for Tahir to make a bold and surprising choice that I couldn't see coming. And toward the end, like almost near the end, I thought she had made one, only to be proven 2 chapters later that she had not. And it's just disappointing because there was nothing in here I didn't expect, nothing I was surprised by. Everything kind of ends up exactly as you expect it to end up. Do you know exactly the things that are going to happen, like the tiny, minute moments? No, because you don't know all the pieces. But this is nothing you haven't seen before. You've seen this movie. You've played this game. Like, you know where it ends. And that was really my problem with this. Now, it was not hard to read. I did not hate it. ACOTAR is bad. ACOTAR is written poorly. ACOTAR is like the antagonist in that. Amarantha's the worst antagonist I've ever read in my entire life. Like, she's 1,000,000 years old, but she acts like a 14-year-old. Like, say you don't love him! Get out of here. Like, get out of here with that dumb crap. In this, Tahir is not a bad writer. Like, her actual technical writing is not bad. It is, what happened is tropey, but her writing isn't bad, except for there's a line about, like, she was a connoisseur of pain, the way others are connoisseurs of wine, that I wrote down because it's a dumb line. So Tahir is not a bad writer, and this is her debut novel. In fact, I may like Tahir's actual writing better than I like Brian McClellan's actual writing. But the story here, while it has the bare bones of something that might be interesting, is just kind of ruined by the fact that the characters aren't nuanced. There's no depth. They're not really interesting. Even the adults, the older characters, read really young. And it's hard to explain what I mean. For example, the Augur characters are supposed to be, they've been alive for 1,000 years or whatever. They don't read to me like when we interact with them, they don't feel to me like they're 1,000 years old. Just like when we see the leader of the resistance and any of these older characters, they don't read like they are older. They read like they are young people who are in old people's bodies. And this doesn't always happen, but that's just what it felt like to me. Despite all of that, because there is an interesting story under here. If it had just taken some twists and turns, it didn't. What bothered me, the single most thing about this book, and I think I may have said so many single most things, but really what I complained about the most when I was talking on Voxer with people about this book is the villains. Okay, so there is a difference between dark and trying too hard. I don't have a problem with dark books. I don't. Like, I read, my fair share of grimdark, and I read a lot of military fantasy where people die a lot, and they die all the time, and that's fine. In this book, this felt like Tahir was trying so hard to show me how dark the world were and how, like, cruel these characters were, that it entered the realm of caricature where to the point of being laughable. There are 2 characters in this book. One, the Commandant, who I told you I'd return to. She is in charge of Blackcliff, and Blackcliff is where, like, the upper echelon kind of, like, I guess, assassins of the military train. They're called masks, and that's cool. The whole concept of the fact they have these like metal masks that end up kind of melding with their face is really neat. Elias, he didn't want to wear his, so his doesn't meld. He can just rip it off, but like it doesn't want to get ripped off, so like takes some of his face with it. Yeah. The Commandant is so laughably cruel. Like, all she does is torture. Like, and it's just, this extends to the Martial Empire just in general. Like, they're bad at their job. They waste resources. Like, they kill people for no reason other than to make a point that doesn't need to be made. Like, everyone's already afraid of you. Killing one more person doesn't make them more afraid of you. Congratulations, now you've just executed some people who were competent at a thing that you don't have anymore. You've just completely thrown out the window the human capital side of your empire. And the Commandant's this way too. Like, literally, the first time we see Laia serving the Commandant, she's like literally 5 seconds late with the Commandant's tea. And the Commandant frickin' flips the tea out of Laia's hand and then backhands Laia and then threatens to like carve her up because she was late with the tea. Do you know what you've accomplished, Commandant? You've literally accomplished nothing. 5 seconds late? That's the stupidest reason to like assault Laia that I've ever seen. And in addition, she says she takes her tea every night at 9. Guess what you've just done? All you did was upend your tea. And she doesn't tell Laia to go get her more. She just does without her tea. What did you accomplish? You accomplished not getting to drink your tea. It's so stupid. And it happens like this all the time. Where she's just like, and I'm supposed to be afraid of her. Like, oh, look at how cruel and unhinged she is. It is not done well. It's not earned. It's just like violence for violence's sake. And it's not one of these worlds where, oh, you know, this, like, it's not a grimdark world where it's just like, oh, random acts of violence happen. It's like, this is her only character trait, is how cruel she is. And she's not interesting. She's not an interesting bad guy at all. However, there is no way she is worse than the character of Marcus. And I've talked to a bunch of people who've read this book, and I was talking to Angela and Charmaine the whole time that I was reading this, and this did not bother either one of them. And it's mostly because Charmaine was too irritated at Laia's poor decision-making, and Angela is too ticked off at Keenan, one of the obvious love interests. I am saying this to you without exaggeration. Literally, everything Marcus says, every single time Marcus speaks, and Marcus is one of the other trainees at Blackcliff, he's one of the top candidates or whatever. He always walks around with his twin brother, Zach, who is quiet and, you know, lets Marcus be the murderous bully. He's the murderous bully. Every single time Marcus is on the page, he is either, if it's a guy, he's threatening to murder them, and I'm not kidding, like everything out of his mouth, he's threatening to murder a guy or castrate them. Every time he's talking to a girl, he's threatening to rape them. And I'm not kidding. I'm literally, every line of dialogue this character has, threatening to murder the guys, threatening to rape the women. And it is so jarring. And it removed me from the story because it is is Tahir just trying to like, am I supposed to be afraid of Marcus? Am I supposed to somehow think like, oh no, what a dangerous guy? It's just a bad character. Like it's nothing about the Commandant's rep or Marcus's rep is earned. It's flanderized to the nth degree, and I just couldn't stand it, guys. I couldn't stand it. So the magic in this is very soft. The only people that really have magic, I mean, we kind of see one of the characters has a quasi-magic ability that we don't really understand anything about, but most of the magic comes from the augurs. And the augurs are less, I mean, they would bother me more if I wasn't already irritated at the Commandant and Marcus. The augurs have the ability to see the future and read your minds. And I mean, that's ballsy. Like, if you are an author and you are choosing to have part of your magic system be the reading of minds and the prediction of the future, I mean, that takes guts, because there's no quicker way to ruin your story than make those your magic system. Because, like, and in this book, it's kind of frustrating because, and again, I've only read the first book, but in this book, it seems like the augurs, who can read your mind and see the future, can do that until they can't. Like, they're not, like, if it is super easy to block your minds from the augurs, then they don't really actually have any power. Like, that's a stupid power if it can be easily taught to block it. And in addition, it's also very frustrating because the augurs know the future, and it's one thing that they know the future and can't interfere. But the problem is that the augurs know the future. They do interfere sometimes, but they interfere in these real, like they're always purposely obtuse when they interfere. And there's nothing about what they're doing or their power that says they have to be obtuse, because they're definitely aiding people in an attempt to call down this future they have seen. But they're always super like vague about it. Like, they're like, oh, I can't tell you. But and it's just like, yeah, you can. Like, you're literally helping this happen. Like, someone else can explain it to you. No, you do it. You tell me. And so that's frustrating, and I didn't really enjoy that either. Now, all that being said, it may seem like I hated this book. I did not. I hated Akatar, and I really, really hated Siege of Tilpor, the first Powder Mage short story / novella. I did not hate this book, and I don't really rank YA books up against adult fantasy books, just because I'm not, like, they don't contain the same elements for me. Just like I would never rate a self-published book from a new author the same way I would rate something like by Brandon Sanderson, who is an established author and has plenty of time to get better, right? So I did not hate this book. I read it in 2.5 days. So the fact that I read it really quickly and it was easy to read is fantastic. I am interested to see where it was going. I did not finish the book and immediately say, cool, I'm done, time to move on. I am interested to see where it goes. From what I have been told by pretty much everybody except Klaus, Klaus says the first book is the best and they get progressively worse, and that 3 especially is a catastrophe. I've been told by pretty much everybody besides Klaus that book 3 is the best, followed by book 4. Book 2, the first 200 pages, and I know it's going to deal with some love triangle bullcrap. I know it is. People tell me that book 2 is maybe the weakest one, and then I have to get through it, though I've been warned that book 1 is the weakest one. If you have read this series, and you have heard everything that I have said, and you know my preferences and my tastes, what do you think I'm going to think about the books coming up, while minimizing spoilers? I know who another POV is going to be in the second book. It's pretty obvious. But I didn't hate this book. I did not like it. That is true facts. But I did not hate it, and I'm interested to see where the story is going to go. I was going to be able to kind of put off continuing with the series, and then Charmaine immediately sent me the second book in the series, so now I would feel worse if I just waited forever to read it. So, curses, foiled again. On the Kingfin approval system, I'm going to give this book a fair minus. I did not hate it, so I don't think it's in the poor, but it's a fair minus, and I can't give it any higher because I didn't like it. I did not hate it, but I did not like it. Out of 5 stars, so I gave Promise of Blood 2.5 stars because I didn't like it at all, but I gave it an extra half star because the setting in that first chapter was brilliant, and I loved the setting, and I gave it half a star for setting. Now, even though I would not rate Ember in the Ashes on the same scale as I would rate an adult fantasy, I could not in good conscience give this book a lower rating than Promise of Blood because I actively disliked reading through Promise of Blood. I did not actively dislike reading through Ember in the Ashes. So, out of 5 stars, I give it 2.5, a 50%. Because, and that's as generous as I could be, and that's because I'm interested in where it's going to go. I'm interested in a couple other things, and I'm trying not to be super hard on it because 1, YA novel, 2, debut novel, which also I try to take into account. So, I am 0 for 1 in enjoying the books that were prescribed to me by Leanna, but I hope that I will enjoy I'll enjoy the other 3 at least a little better. Stay tuned and check out what my thoughts on those are. Guys, that's it for me today. As always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description, and I'll see you next time, guys.